Hello, everybody. How we doing today? Wow, my eyes look amazing. Shout out. Let's have this moment to just appreciate our bodies. I have beautiful fucking eyes. I love myself. And with that, we have our guest for the day. Oh, unable to join. You have been invited, Virpal. Hello, hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for making the time to be here.
I'm super excited and not gonna lie, a little bit nervous, really about sharing my story. But I think I'm just really thinking about stepping into inspiring others to also share their story. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that because the road to inspire others is often fraught with fear and nervousness and all the emotions that's very normal for you to be feeling. And it takes an effort to summon great courage to think beyond ourselves in the interest of serving humanity. And for that, I'm grateful to you, and I am grateful to our audience who are joining in the here and now, as well as who will, you know, um, experience this, in time. And so, with that, if it's okay with you, may I start by sharing a introduction?
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Fantastic. So, welcome again to our audience and to our guest to episode 19 of the Get Out of Your Comfort Zone podcast series. I am so excited for our guest today. Um, she is an energetic healer and an overall badass woman. Virpal grew up in San Jose. She grew up in the U.S. Is currently in her early 30s with two older siblings. Um, and one thing to note, Virpal comes from an immigrant family. Her ethnicity, her heritage is Punjabi Indian. And the other important thing to note is that she is the only daughter of her family. Uh, as far as her background goes, she was trained with both her bachelor's as well as her master's in business and had quite the prolific career in the corporate world um, before, sort of embarking on this current path. In some respects, Virpal is also a global citizen having lived in India and obviously visited a few places around the globe. Part of the reason why I am very excited to share Virpal's story is for two reasons. First, being her experience as a woman who's a person of color and the immigrant experience, that she sort of grew through, and some of the growing pains of empowering herself. Additionally, as the title suggests, this episode is also going to focus on energetic healing. And I know that this is an area where there are a lot of perceptions around the veracity of energetic healing. People sort of doubt and question, and having somebody who very much um, fit the box of this very corporate centric and career focused individual who speaks from their experience of energetic healings and topics that a lot of us don't know a lot about and have questions about as a result of our lack of enlightenment. I thought it would be very important and quite valuable to hear from somebody who comes from our world, right? As somebody who might solicit more trust. So, with that, Virpal, do you feel like I was able to encapsulate everything, or is there anything that you would like to add before we dive into it?
No, thank you so much. And I just want to also just say, I think you dated me a little bit, making me a little younger than I am. I'm actually in my early 40s.
Okay.
So just wanted to make that correction. Yeah, so hi everybody. My name is Virpal, and I am super, super excited to be here and really just share whatever I can about my own personal experience so I can inspire others, and really hope that this gives people courage, as it is taking me courage to also share my story, to really start breaking the chains of the story that women need to really hold their truth. And I think it's time for us as women to start really speaking our truth and starting to change ancestral patterns. So thank you so much.
Here. Thank you. So why don't we begin by first talking about the story of how you and I met.
Yeah, I think it was a really divinely orchestrated meeting. So we were at the Center SF for open mic night, and I had just finished a Reiki infused gong bath activation at the center. So I was there with a few friends, and I always take the time when I feel called to go to open mic and also share a song, actually a sacred hymn from my Sikh ancestry. And so Lion was there with some friends, just kind of passing through San Francisco, and he shared a poem and then also supported another friend with some music. And I think it was really your vulnerability and your courage to really just share who you are really authentically that really instantly kind of made me think about, who is this guy? And really your name, Lion, because that is something that I have been really finding internally, is really connecting to my lioness with my Sikh heritage, but really remembering to have this courage to speak. And so, and then when I shared my hymn playing on the harmonium, it was really, really a connection, because you talked about rainbows. And, for me, rainbows are a big part of my life. They have always been since I was a kid. And really, the fact that I practice Reiki, the chakra system is often represented by the rainbows. And rainbows represent unity for me. So I thought it was really nice to also see another South Asian brother that was there, really speaking your truth and inspiring others, whether it was uncomfortable or not for you. I think sometimes that's something that I sit with, is discomfort of really sharing who I am very authentically, and to be honest, in spaces that are often really don't have a lot of people of color in them. So I was really connecting with you on that part of it, on our ancestry and just your courage. So thank you for just being who you are and really inspiring me to also stand up there and say the things that are uncomfortable.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really appreciate the kind words you shared. And I think this would be a great opportunity to stress the importance of showing up in places like open mics, where everyday people are tapping into their divine spirit which is another way that I refer to the creative spirit, because all creativity in my book comes from a divine place. And showing up to, not only witness and see everyday people, sort of showing their courage through their art, but actually building a devotional practice around showing up, maybe with the intention of waking up the artist or musician within. I have found that our inner child, loves to create, and places like the open mics are very relatable places that are not very intimidating because of just the community and sense of support around, people who come to share. And so let this be a call. If you are listening to this episode, to please look up an open mic near you and go if you've never been. And if you have been, try going more often. So thank you for sharing that, Virpal. With that, let's spend a little bit of time understanding what was it like growing up for you in the Sikh community. Um, and if we could sort of start there, and yeah.
Yeah, so I was deeply entrenched in my community growing up, and I went to temple regularly with my parents. I have two older brothers, and they were often not with us, so it was just me and my parents. And they, enrolled me in Khalsa school, which is sort of a spiritual warrior school, or you can call Sunday school for Sikhs. And they really wanted me to learn all about our teachings and our heritage, which I'm super, super grateful for. And I think, when I was a kid, didn't really understand the value of it. And now as an adult, having come back to my spirituality, really, really appreciating that. But my parents really went out of their way to make sure that I was learning how to read and write in our native tongue, and making sure that that stayed alive, and learning about our Sikh teachings by reading our scriptures, and also learning music. So music is a huge part of the Sikh community in Kirtan being playing the harmonium and tabla. And so, yeah, they made sure that I was learning all of that. So that was sort of the start and introduction for me into spirituality and connection to the divine.
And that's so special, because as an immigrant myself, I grew up in an environment where it was more easy to be completely surrounded by, the tradition that your parents wanted to raise the children in. And I know that it's sort of more challenging to do so in the United States. And I think, really got to give it up to your parents for prioritizing that, to give you the gift of such a strong foundation in understanding the great lineage that you hail from, and the greatness of your ancestors, right? You were able to appreciate that at a very young age. So with that, it'd be really interesting to understand something that came up in our conversation in the lead up to today's episode. Is you chose to step out of your comfort zone by falling, by choosing to date, or finding yourself, being romantically involved with somebody who's not from the same faith as you. Can we talk a little bit about that, and how that impacted your life as it relates to your family dynamics?
Yeah, so I went away to school, moved down to LA, and this was my first sort of experience of really stepping away from my community and my family. And of course, there was community there, and I flocked to them. But it was really the first time that I was able to sort of see who I was, or start to explore who I was outside of my family structure and outside of the community. And so, at some point in college, I met somebody who was not of the same faith. And, I was afraid to tell my parents, one, not just of a different faith, but, girls are really protected in our community, and women in general. And arranged marriage is still something very prominent, and in the US, even if it means introductions through the family. But it was something at a very young age, actually, even before I started college, that my parents asked me if I wanted to get married at 18. And I was like, no, I want to go to college. But it's in a way for them to sort of protect us, and they see it as women sort of in some ways holding the honor of the family, as in if we go the wrong way or in a way that's not within the rules of the community, then we can really taint the family name. And so there was this fear sort of already built into me of really sharing this person that I had really felt a really deep connection with. And so at some point, I did share with a family member who, was trying to convince me to share with my family, with my parents. And I wasn't ready at the time. And my trust was betrayed, and it was broken. And, my family found out, and I was completely open then. It was never that I was hiding anything. I just hadn't shared it yet. And I wanted to share it in a way that was going to feel comfortable and safe for me. And so when that did happen, my family was a little bit shocked, and really wanting me to end the relationship, and were dissuading me from staying in it, and giving me all these reasons as to why it didn't work. And I really understand where they're coming from, considering their background, where they grew up, in the times that they grew up. They grew up in a very different time. They were only 7 years old when the partition of India and Pakistan happened, and they grew up close to the border. And women did really need to be protected. And in a lot of ways, still in that area, in northern India, women are very much protected, because for thousands of years, women have been used as pawns in war, have been kidnapped, raped. There's all these stories that are not from too long ago. And so I really understand they're wanting to protect me. But it definitely created a divide in some ways in our relationship. And that felt really uncomfortable. But I felt it, this was my life. I needed to stand up for myself. And, if my family truly loved me, they would hear me out, and they would want to hear, what made me feel good. So that's kind of just a little bit about what happened.
Yeah, thank you. And you referred to the division within your family between you and them. And so to dig on that a little bit, did you experience any shame cast upon you? Did you experience any double standards? And if so, could you share what your experience in that regard was?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, there's definitely a double standard. As I mentioned, have two older brothers, and their experience, I imagine, just from witnessing, was a lot different than mine. And the questions that I was asked, and in some ways the way I was treated, and I do look back and realize that there was a bit of shaming that happened as well to them also. But I felt like in a lot of ways I was being treated differently because I was a woman. And So there was a little bit of shaming and trying to also like manipulate me or trying to convince me to change my mind through means of, financial support. I had just graduated college. I was still getting on my feet. But, that was a moment I said, hey, well, I greatly, greatly appreciate your support. And, as we had talked earlier, like I really see the privilege that I have and, really acknowledge all of the hard work that my parents have done to get me there, to even send me to school and support me. And so I really, really appreciated that. But I also sort of negotiated saying, hey, these are some promises you made. Can you support me in these ways? And then, all right, I'm on my own and that's fine. But I felt, okay, well, you have supported, your sons in ways that I feel I should also receive that support. And just because I'm a woman, I shouldn't be treated differently.
Yeah. And, one thing I want to call out is, despite being slighted in the way that you were and having to experience the double standard, how you found it within you to negotiate and advocate for yourself, as opposed to, I know that depending on the situation, if I was in your shoes, I could have very easily said, well, you know what, I don't need you. And though I would sort of feel almost kind of, I'm struggling to communicate here, but feel proud in some ways, it would have created additional difficulty and struggle for me that ultimately would not be in my best interest as far as, the amount of struggles that I'm sort of putting myself through. And for you to, in some respects, put your ego aside and still try to advocate for yourself speaks volumes to, self-love, right? Which I think is an important part of the conversation in this regard. So I definitely wanted to call that out. So you stand up for yourself, and you are in LA, and you're in this relationship. What came of that relationship?
So I think, connecting to what we just talked about, something that was really instilled in me from my parents and from my community was a sense of tribe. And so this was also one of the reasons I, probably subconsciously didn't want to burn bridges, because my tribe was very, very important to me and still is, not just my immediate family, but my extended family. And so, there was always that fear of what will people think? Lokiki sochuge. And so that fear was instilled in me, and that shame of, connecting to the family, but also losing the tribe. And so, in the end, the relationship didn't work for a number of reasons. I was needing a tribe and was accustomed to having a tribe. And, the family that I was connecting with this partner, in a lot of ways didn't accept me because I was not part of their tribe, because I was different. So it was happening on both sides. And, I was accepted in some ways, but in a lot of ways I wasn't, because I wasn't of their faith. And so I could see how other women in their faith were being treated differently, and how I was, not welcomed in the way that I could have been. And so, and I also was I realized at that point, there was a lot of transitions happening. The economy had crashed. I wanted to go back to school, and I wasn't really receiving that support in that relationship to do that. And there was a divide being created in a number of other ways. And,
Mm-hmm.
in hindsight, I realized that I had sort of abandoned my soul at that point and
Mm.
started to disconnect from my spirituality. And having been away from my tribe and my community for so long, this sort of realization was slowly creeping in. And once I, ended the relationship and moved back, it definitely, I was able to see where I was missing out on my tribe. And I was also really disconnected from myself.
Mm.
I had made this person my everything, and that was not possible because a tribe is necessary. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to support a person, and one person can't be your everything. So yeah, that's kind of what happened with that. But looking back, I realized that I had sort of abandoned my faith. I was still connected to my faith when I was in college. And because, there was a difference in connection to the divine, this partner was also not connected to the divine and had an experience that was worse than what I had. I mean, I was definitely in high school at some point resisting sort of the cultural practices, the religious practices, because I was trying to find myself outside of my family. But he had experienced something far worse, and it was, religion really forced down his throat. And so he lost his connection to the divine. And, years after I came back, I really started to connect back with myself and looked back at how that was part of my life where I abandoned myself. And so I vowed to not do that again and vowed to really stay connected to what was important for me and my connection to the divine, regardless of anybody else and what their experience was or whether they believed or not.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And so, as a result of the decision you made to end that relationship, and sort of pursue your master's closer to home, and in doing so, reconnect with your family, your faith, your community, your tribe, and yourself and your spirit. Talk to us, paint me a picture of what that journey of empowerment, especially as you created space by, leaving that old life behind, right? In the space that was created, the people that came in, your journey of empowerment, as it relates to your individuality, your independence, while you were in your master's program, look like?
Yeah, so when I came back, I definitely was trying to find myself again because I had sort of absorbed myself into that relationship and also this idea of who I could be when I lived in LA. There was, and just recently, I think earlier this year, I took a trip down there and did some healing around that, of releasing this story of this version of myself that I thought I still was, and still this sort of idealization of this life I could have in LA, and going back there and realizing, no, that's not who I am anymore. And there has been a huge shift, and since I've moved back, and that was in 2009. And so it took a few years where, I went back to school, and that, I made a lot of new friends, and also decided to travel abroad. And so I went and traveled in Europe for a month, and that was my first time sort of traveling by myself, but in a group, like on a tour. And that, really allowed me to see that no matter where I went, my problems or whatever was concerning me went with me. So it didn't matter where I was. That was something within me, and that was something that I needed to face and work through. And, you know, living in India for a little bit, exploring that, and, you know, coming back and really appreciating being home. And, you know, subsequently after that, I traveled to many, many countries. I've traveled to about 22 countries so far. And that all happened after I left LA. And really was like, okay, what is this life that I idealized, that I thought I was going to live because of this person or because of that freedom? It's like, I can have that freedom here. And so I really started to take the reins of my own life. And, you know, even though I was facing some resistance a little bit from my family too, of like, hey, why are you traveling? You're a woman. You shouldn't be going by yourself. You should go with a husband. I said, well, I don't have a husband, and I'm not going to wait and put my life on hold for a partner to live my life. And so in this journey, you know, about, I would say 7 years after I moved back, and was really just starting to discover myself here in the Bay Area, through experiences, through just different modalities. Well, the modalities came around this time of deciding to take a trip to Bali, and my first solo trip, where I wanted to just be with myself. And I had been sort of chasing experiences and realized that that wasn't fulfilling me. And so there was a friend that inspired me who had gone to Bali, and, you know, I had read the book Eat, Pray, Love, and I was really feeling inspired that I was in that place of self-discovery. And so I found this spiritual retreat in Bali, and I traveled for a week alone in Bali, and then another week I had at this retreat, and I got exposed to Reiki, to Chini Sang, which is a Chinese abdominal massage, Chinese astrology, kinesiology, and a couple other healing modalities, and yoga and meditation. And then when I came back, there was just this like sort of knowing of like, I need to connect with Reiki. And so I looked for a teacher here in the Bay Area and found one in San Francisco, and then signed up for Reiki training. And so that kind of started opening up reawakening my connection to the divine, and sort of really connecting to, I would say, magic. You know, some people made fun of me, you know, years after that, of like believing in what they did not believe and what they could not see. And yeah, it's just been an amazing journey since then.
So thank you so much for sharing. I want to delve a little deeper into something that you said. You know, to say it differently, you said that you had a realization, a profound realization, that you don't need to depend on anybody to experience the things that you want to experience. And that is such an ingrained attitude, mentality, in a lot of circles, most definitely the Desi, sort of South Asian tradition. And you also spoke to some of the challenges around, you know, the kinds of sentiments you had to deal with your family as you started to come into your own and travel more independently. How difficult was the decision to step out of your comfort zone and say, hey, I'm going to go to Bali, knowing that I'm going to encounter resistance and fear projection and all of these things?
I think at the point that I, you know, went to Bali, I had already traveled quite a bit. And so I was used to just saying, hey, well, I'm doing this, whether you like it or not. I'm my own person, and I'm an adult now, and you can't really control me. And, you know, also sharing my trips with my parents. And I remember one time actually showing my mom photos from a trip I took to Costa Rica, and showing her some of the things that I did, like zip lining and jumping off of a hanging bridge. And she was like, wow, you know, she's like, why would you do that? But I could see in her eyes that there was a part of her that was like, wow, she's going and doing things and living her life. And I remember at some point, one of my aunts came over when I was at my parents' house, and she was like, hey, why don't you show your aunt that video or those photos? And so I could really see that I was starting to live the life and do the things that my mom never got to do, and the things that she couldn't have even imagined. And so, there's a poem by Rupi Kaur where she talks about that, I'm the first woman in my lineage to have the freedom of choice. I'm the first woman in my lineage to speak my truth. And, my ancestors, my aunties and grandmothers are probably huddled around the mud stove, drinking, masala chai and thinking, wow, one of our own is getting to live so boldly. And so I could see that I'm starting to do the things and say the things that the women before me didn't get to do. And I had those conversations with my mom and still do. And I think she finally has realized that, hey, yeah, I have to change something. Otherwise, we're going to continue going the way that you were, and not, I'm not going to have the freedom, and I'm not going to have my voice heard. And this is not why you came to the US. This is not, you came here to give us more experiences. And if you wanted me to stay quiet and stay the same way, you would have stayed in India. You wouldn't have educated me and told me to become independent. This is who I am as a result of what you have taught me. So that's something that I echo back to my parents very regularly, that to my dad even, like, I am my father's daughter. You have given me all of this knowledge and taught me to be free, and so now I am. I'm flying as much as I can.
Wow. That is so powerful on so many levels. First and foremost, this admiration that your mom, despite all of the struggles she had, which we talked about earlier, we understand why they feel the way they do, especially towards their daughter. But to see that evolution of admiration for her child as a woman, to boldly live her life jumping off of a bridge, and then to also sort of you as a child reminding your parents of I am the sum of all of your efforts, right? Like, there's a reason why you came to this country. There's a reason why you as a woman sort of fed me the ideas and everything that you did. And here I am in a place where I can realize more of my potential than you were able to, or that our ancestors were able to. So accept me as I am. Um, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So getting back to the topic of Reiki, you mentioned that you were called to it. Can you help us understand why you were called to it? What is it about Reiki that resonated with you as much as it did?
So when I experienced Reiki for the first time in Bali, I honestly didn't really feel much, but there was this trust that I had of like what was coming through, of what the healer was sharing with me, blocks in my energy field and my body. And I started to notice a shift. And the kinesiologist I had worked with in Bali, she had talked to me about love languages at that time. And I had not known anything about that. And I realized my love language is touch. And so when I came back, I just was feeling this call to it, and I looked into it more. And when I learned about, just that it's hands-on healing and possibly the chakra system, which I had learned about growing up, from my dad and my brother. They were part of a meditation community that did hands-on healing, but it was called something else. I don't think they even had a name for it. And so I had already been exposed to this in so many ways in my life. And so I took the dive into it and said, okay, I'm going to get Reiki training. And first and foremost, it's for myself to be able to heal myself. And if I can also support people in my family and my community, great. And so this sort of started the journey. And when I was practicing on others, because that's part of, once you get an attunement in Reiki, you need to practice to build that muscle, allowing energy to flow through you, but also to strengthen your intuition. And when people shared with me what they were experiencing, it really started to call me even more of the sensations they were feeling, the ease and relaxation they would feel, and oftentimes experiences that they were having. And I was like, wow, this is really doing something. And even if I don't feel what they feel or see what they see, they're receiving whatever they need to receive. And this does have a profound effect. And, over the course of years, it sort of started to open me up to other modalities, and also just starting to expand my awareness and consciousness of also how to build a strong relationship with myself and with the divine, and also everyday tools to use for self-care. So that kind of started my journey into Reiki.
Thank you. One thing of note that I want to sort of call more attention to is how you alluded to the fact that when you first experienced Reiki, you were somewhat of a skeptic, right? You didn't feel much. However, there was something within you that, let's call it inexplicable, that called you and kept calling you to explore and enlighten yourself and educate yourself and seek out knowledge in this regard. Now, I want to put a pin in that for just 1 second. And earlier today, you shared a post with me about sort of this over-reliance on the intellect as it relates to Western scientific thinking, which primarily and large parts of it over the last couple of hundred of years was dominated by sort of European mentalities, especially those traditions, cultures, countries who were colonizers, right? And as part of, this sort of stewardship, for lack of a better term, of this Western scientific way of thinking, there was a lot of shade, there was a lot of doubt cast upon anything that did not fit that way of thinking. And a lot of it is ingrained, even in those amongst us who are not white, right? Because we grew up in a certain world, right? And there's this programming of feeling discomfort in trying to better understand traditions of our ancestors, who they relied on for God knows how long, right? And in trying to reconnect with those roots and learnings and teachings, this discomfort within yourself, right? as a way of deprogramming what we might have been led to believe of, Reiki, the chakra system, yoga, you know, energetic healing, not being a verifiable way of measuring how effective a healing modality might be. So that was brilliant, first of all, for you to share that with me and the timing of it all. But I'd love to hear you share more about your journey navigating that struggle, you know? And probably at times, you said it yourself, your friends making you feel like, they're whatever challenging emotion, uh, and what was it like for you to navigate that and continue to follow that voice, that intuition? Please share with us.
Yeah, it's it brings back a lot of memories of various people, particularly people that I loved very deeply, and them having a really deep effect on me when they didn't believe me. And it wasn't even about believing me, it was just trusting that, what I was experiencing was my experience, and saying, okay, I honor what your experience is. And I've found that oftentimes, because somebody hasn't experienced something, they automatically don't believe it. And I've started to have more, give them more grace, and also have more compassion for those that have not experienced, that have resistance because of all that you said of these, this programming to not believe, because we need a scientific reason as to why it works. And I think because I have been initiated multiple times in my life, initiated in the Sikh faith by taking Amrit, which is called nectar, being initiated through the Vietnamese teacher Lung Minh Dang, being initiated again through Reiki. This was like a remembering for me. And from, what I've learned in the last 2 years, and even growing up, learning about karma, and that, my soul is infinite. There are things that I had believed, and I have believed for a long time, and for a moment had lost faith because others in my life didn't believe, and didn't believe there was a higher power because of their wounding. Something that's really kept me going is my faith, and saying, hey, well, I've seen my parents manifest things in their life, and that is through the teachings that they grew up with, through teachings that they've learned. My dad, we still talk about it, how he has talked about manifestation of, like, he wanted a certain type of car, and so he like had a picture of it and he meditated on it, and he got the same car, the same color, all of that. He was able to manifest things, through his prayer, his meditation, through also giving back, and so I believe in this divine connection. I experience it all the time now, through the divine timing of that post that I shared with you. I literally just saw it like, an hour or two before I sent it to you. And I think that once we start opening up to receive, and we put down our walls, we start to experience things. And that's really the best thing you can do, is experience it. Don't be a naysayer if you've never actually experienced it, because you don't have any experience with the thing that you're putting down. But I continue to go forward, and I had community. The book The Secret was really something that helped support me. The law of attraction. So I started to use the law of attraction, of calling in people in my life that were more aligned with me, that were on the same path. And slowly but surely, I started to see these people arrive. And those that were not in alignment with me were starting to fall away. And some of the relationships were definitely more challenging to release. But when I released them, when I fully released them from my heart, and knew that that was not the best path for me to stay in these relationships, things really started to shift and open up. And I've seen just in the last 2 years how much has shifted in my life.
Mm. Wow. Mm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and validating my own experience, right, of the journey I have been on, and how it's fraught with a lot of difficulty, but the belief in the magic, right, of if you believe in it, then it will reveal itself, and your desires, rooted in your heart, will start to manifest themselves. Um, I I want to spend a little bit of time before we end for today, um, trying to better understand, you know, um, given Reiki and energetic healing is something that is not well understood, um, generally speaking, in our society, but which is changing, and you're playing a role in that. Um, there is also an aspect of Reiki, even though it is primarily a touch-based healing modality, where you can um, perform and heal somebody via distance using technology. And, and I know there's a lot of people who would really question how effective um, that could actually be. And when we were chatting, you shared a profound explanation for what gives you faith in the belief that Reiki and energetic healing not only works, but we as individuals have the power, if we set our intentions, to heal even via distance and defy the time-space continuum. So can you please elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, thank you. One thing I was remembering was when we first talked, you had shared that you had only experienced Reiki via distance and you didn't know that it was actually hands-on. And so I thought that was really surprising. And you're the first person that I have met that had that experience. Where it's usually reversed. People have either never experienced Reiki or they've only experienced it in person. And so, when people say, "Oh, well, what do you mean you can send it through the computer? Like, I don't even need to be on the phone, like on the phone or the computer." Well, yeah, like how are we having this conversation right now through a phone? Like, how does that work? I don't need to know. I'm experiencing it. I don't need to know all the science behind it. I trust it. I trust my experience. And to be honest, this could all be a part of our imagination that we've all co-created together. And that's something that I've actually heard of as well, is that we are co-creating all of these planes and all of this material because we have decided as a human race to do that collectively. And so we can shift that perspective by really just looking at what is around us. How does a TV work? How do the radio waves go through time and space? They do. And I don't need to know all the science behind it because it works. And I've experienced it. And I also have a number of people that have experienced Reiki with me, that have experienced it without me, with other people. I had a client who told me they had experienced Reiki before and they didn't feel anything and they didn't know it worked. But he had this calling after a chakra workshop that I did that, hey, let me try it out. And so he tried a little mini session and he had a very profound experience. And, just hearing people's experiences as well, being in plant medicine ceremonies and supporting people with Reiki, and then hearing afterwards how profound it was for them, how it really helped them get through a block and sort of step over a hurdle that they were facing. That really gives me faith in, continuing to do this work. And there's a certain experiences that are hard to explain, and everybody's consciousness is different. And so we're not going to all experience the same thing. A lot of times people have expectations of Reiki, of other energy modalities, of working with plant medicine, of even yoga or Ayurveda. Like they don't trust, they don't have faith. And it takes time. Sometimes, even takes our being time, our body, our energy body to actually absorb that healing. And it also takes a lot of surrender and a lot of just being open, just like it takes when we love. And so, in this experience of love, I've noticed in my relationships, even with people, of people resisting or believing that love is even there. And that's often a result of their own experiences and their own traumas. And there's resistance there. And so once they start to feel something, they doubt it because they're kind of in this pattern of trauma. And so I've seen a lot of reasons why people are resistant to it, not only because we've been brainwashed in so many ways to believe it's not true, to keep us under control and to keep our consciousness at bay so that we don't question things. You can see what's happening on a global scale, that people are questioning things and starting to really take their power back. And that's a reason why we've been kept asleep for so long, and that's starting to shift. So energy work is one of the modalities. You can use acupuncture, you can use Ayurveda, even acupressure. Like there's so many different modalities, yoga, meditation. You can get to states of consciousness that have not been explained. Science is now, there are some people that are studying meditation, and Reiki is in hospitals. John Hopkins has Reiki, UCSF has Reiki. They're starting to offer it to hospice patients. So there is research starting to be done on this work, but it's something that you really need to experience. And so I really go based on experience. And people are looking for the science behind it. I really encourage you to start doing that research. Be one of those people that's leading that research to explain to those that need to explain it. But I think that really when we need to start dipping down into our hearts, so that wanting to rationalize everything, that's the masculine part of our being. And it's like when we're stuck in our head a lot. And when we drop into our heart, we can really step into our feminine aspect and really be in flow and start to trust. That's what our intuition is. It's trust. Our gut feeling is trust. It's not based on science. We know when to breathe. We know when we're hungry because we're listening to our instincts. And so, this work is really about tapping into our intuition and our deeper instinct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that trust when you surrender is rooted in a belief. And really that's the foundation of all belief, and the leap of faith that we know about. And that's something that's not an alien topic to most of us. And it's a wonderful way of, sort of making it relatable to audiences who've never heard of Reiki or chakras, right? Or energetic healing. But you think about it, how does modern telecommunications and modern technology really work? It's through movement of energy in a lot of different ways. And we have powers as humans. So it is with that, I can't begin to thank you, Virpal, for making the time and showing up, in your power with so much courage to share on topics, not just one. I counted at least 3 separate topics that are, somewhat controversial. And it speaks volumes to your courage as a woman, your courage as a Sikh, your courage as a human to show up, to speak your truth with the intention of stirring something within others, inspiring them. For that, I am very grateful for the opportunity to honor you in this way, and I am very grateful to our audience for making the time in their life to absorb what we are emitting. With that, do you have any last words that you would like to share before we end for the day, Virpal?
So if anybody's interested in learning more about Reiki, you can reach out to me, and you can also check out my website, risinglotusreiki.com. I also host events in San Francisco, and I'm in the Bay Area, so definitely just reach out if you want to have a conversation or you're interested in any of the things that I mentioned. I'm here, and I really just want to thank you, Lion, for just even initiating this conversation, and thanking all of my sisters out there that have done things to break the chains of their ancestry and really starting to shift things for your lineages. It's really taking a lot of us to shift things on this planet, and really also for not just the feminine but the masculine to step up and honor the feminine and really change the stories and relating towards women. And so I really honor you, Lion, for doing that and being a divine masculine and holding this container for me and for these conversations, because as you mentioned, we are leaving a legacy here, and I really appreciate you just holding this space. So thank you so much.
Well, it is my privilege to have this opportunity. And on that note, we'll be sharing Virpal's contact and Instagram information in the episode description. And with that, I bid you all adieu, love and light, till the next episode. Cheers.